My name is Isabella, I'm 28 years old, and vintage automobiles have been my passion since I was 7 years old. I sacrificed everything for 5 grueling years, working 70-hour weeks at a demanding investment firm in Boston, all to finally purchase my dream car, a stunning 1969 Mustang Boss 429. My family always claimed to support me, but they had a dangerous habit of crossing boundaries whenever it suited them. I never could have imagined that returning from my 3-week business trip to London would reveal the most shocking betrayal of my life. When I asked where my car was, my mother actually had the audacity to smirk and say, "Thanks to your precious car, our baby girl is living her best life in the French Riviera." I started laughing, and she snapped, "What exactly is so amusing about your sister's happiness?" But here's the thing, before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with family members who think your hard-earned possessions are theirs to do whatever they want with. Trust me, what unfolded after this moment will absolutely blow your mind and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. My obsession with classic cars began during those magical Saturday mornings when I was 7 years old. My grandfather, Antonio, would arrive at our house in his rumbling 1967 Camaro and take me to his workshop where he restored vintage American muscle cars. Those mornings became the most sacred part of my childhood. While other kids my age were glued to television screens watching cartoons, I was learning the intricate art of engine restoration, discovering how to change transmission fluid, replace worn brake pads, and identify the subtle differences between various carburetor models. "Bella," my grandfather would say, using his special nickname for me that made me feel like the most important person in the world, "these machines aren't just collections of metal and rubber. They have spirits, they have stories to tell, and they choose their owners." I believed every single word he spoke, especially when he would lovingly polish his prized possession, a breathtaking 1969 Mustang Boss 429 in grabber blue. The aggressive lines of that car, the thunderous growl of its 429 cubic inch engine, the way sunlight would dance across its flawless paint surface, it was pure automotive poetry in motion. Someday, I whispered to myself that first time I laid eyes on it, my small hands pressed against the passenger window, I'm going to own one exactly like this. It wasn't just a casual wish or childhood fantasy. It was a solemn promise I made to myself that would shape every major decision in my life for the next 2 decades. My parents, Michael and Catherine, never understood what they considered my unfeminine fascination with automobiles. "Why can't you be interested in something more appropriate for a young lady?" My mother would sigh dramatically whenever I came home with engine grease embedded under my fingernails and motor oil staining my clothes. Like dance classes or art lessons or even cooking. My father would simply shake his head with a mixture of bewilderment and mild disappointment, as if my passion for cars represented some fundamental failure in their parenting. Their reaction to my younger sister Sophia was entirely different. For years my junior, Sophia embodied everything I wasn't in their traditional minds: delicate, conventionally feminine, and interested in all the socially acceptable pursuits for young women. When she expressed interest in ballet lessons at age 6, my parents immediately enrolled her in the most expensive and prestigious dance academy in Boston. When I begged for automotive shop classes at 12, my mother scoffed dismissively and claimed we couldn't possibly afford extracurricular activities that year due to unexpected expenses. This glaring pattern of favoritism continued relentlessly throughout our entire childhood and teenage years. Sophia received designer clothes from high-end boutiques while I made do with hand-me-downs from cousins and thrift store finds. Sophia got an elaborate Sweet 16 party with 50 guests, professional catering, and a live DJ while I received a homemade cake and a generic greeting card. When Sophia graduated high school, she was gifted a brand new Honda Civic with all the bells and whistles. When I graduated with honors and a full academic scholarship, I received college application fee waivers and a stern lecture about the importance of student loan responsibility. Don't misunderstand me. I genuinely loved my sister despite everything. None of this differential treatment was her fault, and she was often oblivious to the disparity. But the inequality in how we were treated was impossible to ignore and created a deep resentment that would take years to fully understand and process. I moved to Boston for college, absolutely determined to forge my own independent path in life. I juggled 3 different part-time jobs while maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA in finance and economics. After graduation, I landed a coveted position at Whitmore and Associates, one of the most prestigious investment banking firms on the East Coast. The work environment was absolutely brutal. 80-hour weeks were considered normal, weekends were rarely free, and the pressure was relentless. But the compensation package made every sacrifice worthwhile. I lived as frugally as a monk, sharing a cramped apartment in Somerville with 2 other recent graduates, bringing packed lunches to work every single day, and avoiding any unnecessary expenses. Every spare dollar from my paycheck went directly into a dedicated savings account with one specific purpose: purchasing my dream car. While my colleagues splurged on expensive designer wardrobes, exotic international vacations, and luxury apartments in trendy neighborhoods, I kept my focus laser sharp on my ultimate goal. 5 years of grueling 70-plus-hour work weeks, virtually no social life, and monk-like financial discipline. Then finally, after years of obsessively searching online auction sites, classic car forums, and dealer networks across the country, I found it. A 1969 Mustang Boss 429 in grabber blue, identical to my grandfather's beloved car. The owner was a serious collector in Connecticut who was downsizing his impressive collection due to health issues. The asking price was exactly $95,000, every single penny I had managed to save over those 5 years of sacrifice. The day I drove that magnificent car home to Boston was one of the most emotionally overwhelming experiences of my entire life. My grandfather had passed away 3 years earlier after a long battle with cancer, but I could feel his presence in the passenger seat beside me as I cruised down Route 95. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered through tears of joy and grief that streamed down my face. "We actually did it." That car represented so much more than just a luxury purchase or material possession. It was tangible proof of my work ethic, my independence, my refusal to accept limitations, and most importantly, it was a physical connection to the man who had believed in my potential when absolutely no one else did. My boyfriend Tyler understood this emotional connection perfectly. We had met at a classic car show in Hartford 6 months after I purchased the Mustang. He owned a meticulously restored 1968 Camaro SS, which had immediately given us common ground for hours of passionate conversation. Unlike my family, Tyler completely got it. He understood why I would rather spend a Saturday afternoon performing my own maintenance than shopping at expensive malls. He respected the deep sentimental value of my car and shared my genuine passion for preserving American automotive history. He never made me feel weird or unfeminine for knowing more about engines than most professional mechanics. For 2 blissful years, that Mustang was my pride and absolute joy. I treated it like a priceless work of art, driving it only on perfect weather days, storing it properly in a climate-controlled garage during Boston's harsh winters, using only premium gasoline and high-quality motor oil. I never could have imagined that the greatest threat to my beloved Boss 429 would come not from car thieves, vandals, or natural disasters, but from the people who claim to love me most in this world, my own family. The call that would change everything came on a Tuesday afternoon in early September. My boss, Patricia Henderson, summoned me to her corner office immediately. As I walked the seemingly endless corridor to her imposing office, my mind raced through every possible scenario, most of them terrifying. Was I being terminated? Had I made some catastrophic error on the Morrison account? Had the firm discovered some mistake that would ruin my career? "Isabella," Patricia said as I entered, her expression completely unreadable and professional. "How would you describe your proficiency in French?" I blinked in complete surprise, thrown off guard by the unexpected question. "Conversational level, I suppose. I took 4 years in college and spent a semester in Paris." She nodded, apparently satisfied with my response. "Excellent. I need you in London immediately. Blackstone Financial Group is looking to expand their European portfolio operations, and they specifically requested someone who understands both American financial markets and European business culture." This was absolutely huge, a career-defining opportunity that could change my entire professional trajectory. Blackstone Financial was a potential client worth tens of millions to our firm. Successfully landing their business would mean substantial bonuses, rapid promotions, and serious advancement opportunities that most associates could only dream about. The senior partners and I unanimously agree that you're the best person for this critical assignment. You'll be leading our entire presentation team in London. I was completely speechless. Senior colleagues with decades more experience and prestigious MBA degrees were being passed over in favor of me. This was literally the opportunity of a lifetime. It's a 3-week engagement, Patricia continued matter-of-factly. You'll depart this Friday. My assistant will email you all the detailed logistics and travel arrangements. 3 weeks away from home was longer than I had ever been absent from Boston. While I was absolutely thrilled about this incredible professional opportunity, my mind immediately went to my most precious possession, my Mustang. My neighborhood in Cambridge had recently experienced a troubling series of car break-ins and vandalism incidents, and the thought of leaving my baby unattended for nearly a month made me genuinely nervous. After carefully considering various security options, I decided the safest place would be my parents' suburban home in Lexington. They had a spacious 2-car garage, lived in a quiet neighborhood with extremely low crime rates, and despite our complicated relationship history, I trusted them to at least provide secure storage. That Thursday evening, I made the 40-minute drive to my childhood home, my Mustang purring contentedly beneath me. My father was trimming hedges in the front yard when I pulled into the familiar driveway, and he immediately stopped his work to admire the car as I carefully parked. "Still an absolute beauty," he said genuinely, running his weathered hand appreciatively along the pristine hood. "Your grandfather would be incredibly proud of what you've accomplished." My mother appeared at the front door, drying her hands on a decorative kitchen towel and looking pleasantly surprised. "Isabella, what a wonderful surprise. Are you planning to stay for dinner tonight?" I explained about the London assignment and my request to store the car in their garage for the 3 weeks I'd be abroad. "Of course, sweetheart," my father said immediately and enthusiastically. "We have plenty of room now that Sophia moved her belongings to her new apartment downtown." "That's such wonderful news about your business trip," my mother added, though I could tell she didn't fully grasp the enormous professional significance of the opportunity. "But 3 weeks seems like such a terribly long time to be away. Won't your supervisor be upset if you fly home for a weekend visit in between?" I patiently explained that international business negotiations didn't work that way, and eventually she seemed to understand the commitment required. As my father helped me carefully position the Mustang in their garage, I gave him extremely detailed instructions. "It needs to be started once every week and allowed to run for exactly 15 minutes to keep all the fluids circulating properly, but please don't drive it anywhere. The insurance situation is complicated and specific to me as the registered owner. Also, make absolutely sure to use this custom-fitted car cover." I showed him the expensive protective cover I had brought specifically for this purpose. "And whatever you do, please don't let anyone else touch it or even sit inside." "Isabella, I've been maintaining automobiles since before you were born," my father said, slightly offended by my detailed instructions. "I'll treat it like it's made of pure gold and precious gems." "I know you will, Dad. I just worry because this car means absolutely everything to me." That night at dinner, Sophia joined us, bringing her usual dramatic energy. She had recently graduated from college with a communications degree and was working as an administrative assistant at a trendy marketing firm, her first real job in the adult world. Throughout the entire meal, she complained constantly about how stressful her work environment was and how desperately she needed an escape from her responsibilities. "All my college friends are planning this absolutely amazing Mediterranean yacht cruise," she sighed with theatrical despair. "But I just can't afford it on my pathetic entry-level salary. Life is so incredibly unfair to people our age." I bit my tongue hard, remembering how I had worked multiple demanding jobs throughout college witut ever complaining or expecting financial assistance. My mother predictably made sympathetic noises and suggested that perhaps my father might be able to help with a substantial cost. "We'll have to see what's possible," my father said diplomatically. "Money is quite tight right now with the kitchen renovation project." Before leaving the next morning, I called Tyler to finalize our security plan. We had discussed the possibility of swapping our cars as an extra precaution since his Camaro SS looked similar enough to my Mustang from a distance but was worth significantly less money. "I'll come by your parents' place tomorrow afternoon and make the switch as planned," he confirmed. "I'll take incredible care of your baby, and they'll never know the difference unless they look closely at the details." "You're absolutely the best," I told him gratefully. "I'll call you as soon as I land in London." The following morning, I boarded my transatlantic flight feeling completely confident that my most precious possession was in trustworthy hands. I had no way of knowing that my careful planning and security measures would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter my family relationships and force me to confront painful truths I had been avoiding for years. During my 3 intensive weeks in London, I maintained regular contact with home. My mother and father always assured me that everything was perfectly fine and that they were taking excellent care of the car. However, in the final days of my business trip, my mother's text messages became somewhat cryptic and strange. "We have a big surprise waiting for when you get home," she texted mysteriously, which I assumed meant a welcome home dinner or perhaps a small celebration of my professional success. The London presentation exceeded every expectation imaginable. The Blackstone executives were thoroughly impressed with our comprehensive proposal, and by the end of the second week, they had signed a contract worth $18 million to our firm. At the celebratory dinner on my final night in England, Patricia hinted strongly about a major promotion awaiting my return to Boston. "Senior Vice President has a very nice ring to it, don't you think?" she said with a knowing smile and raised champagne glass. I boarded my return flight feeling absolutely on top of the world. I couldn't wait to get home, take my beloved Mustang for a long, therapeutic drive along the scenic Massachusetts coastline, and share my incredible professional success with Tyler and my family. The 8-hour flight gave me plenty of time to daydream about my triumphant homecoming and plan how I would celebrate this career milestone. If only I had known what was actually waiting for me back home. My plane touched down at Logan International Airport at 3:30 p.m. on a beautiful sunny Tuesday afternoon. After clearing customs and collecting my luggage, I took a taxi directly to my parents' house in Lexington, bypassing my own apartment entirely. I was exhausted from the long international flight and jet lag, but energized by the thought of being reunited with my magnificent Mustang. "Just 10 more minutes," I texted Tyler, who had promised to meet me at my parents' house to swap our cars back to their original owners. As the taxi turned onto my parents' familiar tree-lined street, I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with relief at being home. But as we pulled into the driveway, I immediately frowned with confusion. Something was definitely wrong with this picture. The garage door was wide open, clearly revealing my father's sedan and my mother's SUV, but there was absolutely no sign of any Mustang or Camaro. "Maybe they moved it to the backyard or something," I muttered to myself as I paid the taxi driver and wheeled my suitcase toward the front door, trying to suppress a growing sense of unease. My mother opened the door before I could even ring the doorbell, greeting me with an overly enthusiastic hug that I returned somewhat half-heartedly, my mind still focused entirely on the missing car. "Welcome home, sweetheart. How was your flight? You must be absolutely exhausted from all that traveling." "The flight was fine, Mom," I said distractedly, cutting through her small talk. "Where exactly is my car?" A strange expression flickered across her face, a mixture of defensiveness, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite identify or interpret. She ushered me inside without directly answering my question, which immediately raised red flags in my mind. My father was sitting in his favorite recliner, reading the newspaper with unusual intensity. He looked up when I entered, his smile somehow not quite reaching his eyes in the way it normally did. "Dad, where is my Mustang?" I asked directly, a cold knot of dread beginning to form in my stomach. He cleared his throat uncomfortably and glanced nervously at my mother, who had suddenly become very busy arranging cookies on a decorative plate as if this were a completely normal homecoming visit. "Well, honey," he began, his voice unnaturally high and strained. "Something unexpected came up while you were away in London." The knot in my stomach tightened into a painful cramp. What exactly does that mean? "Where is my car?" My mother turned around then, her chin lifting in that particular way it always did when she was preparing to defend an absolutely indefensible position. "Sophia needed some help," she said with forced firmness, as if this explanation made perfect sense. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity presented itself. I stared at her with complete incomprehension, feeling like I was having some kind of surreal nightmare. What does Sophia's situation have to do with my car? Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life, my mother said with what looked more like a sneer than a smile. She pulled out her smartphone and showed me Sophia's Instagram feed with obvious pride. There was my sister posing glamorously on the deck of an expensive yacht in the Mediterranean, cocktail in her manicured hand, designer sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. The pieces of this horrifying puzzle clicked into place with devastating clarity. You sold my car, I said, the words coming out as barely a whisper because I was too shocked to even raise my voice properly. Now, Isabella, my father began in his most placating tone, try to understand the situation from our perspective. Sophia was going through a really difficult time at her new job. All her college friends were going on this cruise together, and she was going to be the only one left out. It would have been absolutely devastating for her social life and mental health. So you sold my car, I repeated, this time shouting as my voice finally found its strength. The disbelief and betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. You can always buy another car, my mother said dismissively, as if we were discussing a piece of furniture instead of my most precious possession. You make excellent money now with that fancy job. Sophia needed this opportunity. She needed to network with the right people and make important connections for her future career. I felt like I was trapped in some bizarre alternate reality nightmare. My hands began to shake uncontrollably as the full impact of their betrayal hit me with devastating force. That car was registered in my name, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. You had absolutely no legal right to sell it. My parents exchanged another uncomfortable glance, and I could see the guilt written clearly across both their faces. Well, technically, my father mumbled, unable to meet my eyes. We told the buyer that you were selling it and had specifically authorized us to handle the entire transaction on your behalf. My heart was pounding so violently I could feel it throbbing in my temples. The room seemed to spin slightly as I tried to process the magnitude of what they had done to me. Do you have any idea what that car meant to me? My voice cracked with raw emotion. It wasn't just transportation or some material possession. It was my connection to Grandpa Antonio. It was the result of 5 years of sacrifice and hard work. It represented everything I had worked for. It's just a car, Isabella, my mother said coldly, her tone hardening with each word. Family is what truly matters in this world. Sophia is your sister, and she needed this opportunity more than you needed that piece of metal. And I don't matter at all, I said bitterly. My feelings, my property, my boundaries, none of that counts for anything in this family. Don't be so dramatic and selfish, my mother scoffed dismissively. You've always been so materialistic, so focused on things instead of people. Sophia has been struggling with depression and anxiety. This cruise was therapeutic for her mental health. Depression? I echoed incredulously. Since when has Sophia been dealing with depression? She's been very stressed at her new job, my father offered weakly. Her supervisor is quite demanding, and the work environment is challenging for someone with her sensitive nature. I laughed then, a harsh, bitter sound with absolutely no humor in it. Welcome to adult life, Dad. I worked 70-hour weeks for 5 straight years to afford that car. Did you ever once consider selling your own possessions to make my life easier when I was struggling? That's completely different, my mother said, growing increasingly defensive. You've always been the strong one, the independent one. Sophia is sensitive and delicate. She needs more support and protection than you do. The double standard was so blatant and shameless it literally took my breath away. For a long moment, I just stood there in their living room, trembling with a mixture of rage, disbelief, and heartbreak that I had never experienced before. Then a thought occurred to me that sent another wave of nausea through my system. How much did you sell it for? I demanded, dreading the answer. More uncomfortable glances were exchanged between my parents, and I could see them silently debating who would deliver this final blow. Finally, my father answered reluctantly, $55,000. I gasped audibly, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. $55,000. That car was worth at least $95,000, possibly more given its condition and documentation. Did you do any research at all before selling it? The buyer said that was a fair market price, my father muttered defensively. We needed to complete the sale quickly before you returned from London. That statement, so naked in its premeditated betrayal, hit me like a physical blow. They had deliberately rushed the sale to present me with an irreversible fait accompli. They had known exactly what they were doing and had chosen to deceive me completely. Who did you sell it to? I asked, fighting desperately to keep my voice steady and controlled. Some collector from New Hampshire, my mother said vaguely, waving her hand dismissively. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. My phone buzzed with an incoming text message. It was from Tyler, just pulled up outside. Where should I park the Mustang? And suddenly, in the midst of my overwhelming anger and heartbreak, a realization dawned on me. A realization that would change absolutely everything about this situation. The text from Tyler triggered a crucial memory that had been pushed aside in the shock of discovering my parents' betrayal. I started to laugh, softly at first, then louder and more genuinely. The sound was strange even to my own ears, a release of tension rather than an expression of joy or amusement. My mother's face contorted with confusion and growing annoyance. What exactly is so funny about your sister's happiness and success? She demanded. I took a deep breath, trying to collect myself and savor this moment. You know what's actually funny, Mom? You stole and sold a car that wasn't even mine. My father frowned deeply, his confusion evident. What are you talking about? We watched you drive it here 3 weeks ago. I held up one finger, signaling them to wait just a moment, and stepped outside to greet Tyler, who was now standing in the driveway looking completely confused and concerned. After a brief, whispered exchange, he followed me back inside, equally curious to hear my explanation. Mom, Dad, you remember Tyler, right? I gestured to my boyfriend, who nodded curtly at my parents, his expression carefully guarded. Of course we remember him, my mother said impatiently. Isabella, what do you mean the car wasn't yours? I smiled then, feeling a strange, powerful calm settle over me for the first time since arriving home. The car you sold wasn't my 1969 Mustang Boss 429. It was Tyler's 1968 Camaro SS. The color drained completely from both my parents' faces as I explained the car-swapping security arrangement Tyler and I had implemented for my protection while traveling abroad. The day after I left for London, Tyler had come by as planned and swapped his Camaro for my Mustang. To the untrained eye, both cars looked similar. Classic American muscle cars from the late 1960s, but Tyler's car was worth approximately $35,000, not $95,000. So you see, I concluded with growing satisfaction, you didn't actually sell my car. My Mustang has been safely stored in Tyler's climate-controlled garage for the past 3 weeks, exactly as we planned. What you sold was Tyler's car, without his knowledge, without his consent, and without any legal authority whatsoever. But it looked exactly like yours, my father stammered weakly. That was precisely the point, Tyler said, speaking for the first time since entering the house. They're both classic muscle cars from the same era, designed to look similar from a distance. But mine is a different model entirely, with different documentation and registration. Oh my God, my mother whispered, sinking heavily into a chair as the full implications hit her. What have we done? You've committed multiple felonies, I said flatly, with no emotion in my voice whatsoever. You sold property that belonged to neither you nor me. You forged documents with my signature. You lied to a buyer about your authority to sell. This is serious criminal behavior. We could go to prison, my father said, his face turning ashen grey. Yes, Tyler agreed grimly, his voice hard as steel. Motor vehicle theft over $20,000 is a Class 2 felony in Massachusetts. Add wire fraud if you received electronic payment, and each charge carries up to 20 years in prison. My mother began to cry then, loud, dramatic sobs that once upon a time might have manipulated me into comforting her. Not today. Not after this betrayal. How were we supposed to know it wasn't your car? She wailed pitifully. You tricked us deliberately. I didn't trick anyone, I corrected her firmly. I trusted Tyler to protect my property because I knew, on some deep level, that my own family couldn't be trusted with something precious to me. Clearly, my instincts were absolutely correct. You have to help us fix this, my father pleaded desperately, looking suddenly much older than his 62 years. We can't go to prison. We didn't know we were doing anything wrong. Ignorance isn't a legal defense, Tyler pointed out coldly. And neither is family loyalty. You stole my car and sold it without permission. That's grand theft, plain and simple. My phone rang then with a call from an unknown number. I answered it cautiously. Is this Isabella Martinez? A male voice asked. Yes, this is Isabella. Who's calling? This is David Richardson. I recently purchased a 1968 Camaro SS from your parents, supposedly on your behalf. There seems to be some problem with the title transfer and registration. My eyes locked with my parents, who were watching me with naked terror in their expressions. In that crucial moment, I had a choice to make. I could throw them completely under the bus, immediately tell this stranger the truth about their theft and fraud, or I could buy some time to figure out a solution that would deliver justice without completely destroying my family. Mr. Richardson, I said carefully, there has indeed been a significant misunderstanding. Could I possibly call you back within the next hour? I need to discuss some important details with my parents first. He agreed reluctantly, and I hung up, turning back to face the anxious, frightened faces watching my every move. That was your buyer, I informed them matter-of-factly. He's having trouble with the title transfer, probably because the car is registered to Tyler, not to me. So now we have a very important decision to make about how to handle this situation. Please, Isabella, my mother begged, her makeup streaked with tears. Please help us. We never meant to hurt anyone. Except me, I pointed out sarcastically. You were perfectly fine with hurting me. We thought you would understand, my father said weakly. We thought family would help family in a crisis. Is that right? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Then I guess it's time for you to help Tyler, since you're the ones who actually stole from him. My parents looked at Tyler with new fear in their eyes, suddenly realizing that their fate rested not just in my hands, but in his as well. What do you want us to do? My father asked Tyler directly, his voice barely above a whisper. Tyler crossed his arms, his expression stern and unforgiving. First, I want to know exactly who has my car and how much they paid for it. Then we can start figuring out how you're going to make this right. As my parents fumbled around trying to find the buyer's contact information and all the paperwork from the sale, I stepped outside with Tyler to have a private conversation about our options. Standing in the driveway where my Mustang should have been parked, we spoke in hushed tones about the various paths forward. I cannot believe they actually did this to you, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. Your own parents. Believe it, I said grimly. They've always favored Sophia over me. I just never thought they would go this far, actually committing crimes for her benefit. Do you want to press criminal charges? We absolutely could, and we'd win easily. I sighed deeply, wrestling with conflicting emotions. I don't want my parents to go to prison, but I also don't want them to get away with this completely. They need to understand that actions have serious consequences. Tyler nodded, taking my hand supportively. We'll figure this out together, whatever you decide. When we returned inside, my parents were huddled anxiously over my father's laptop, having located the buyer's information and all the documentation from the sale. The reality of their legal situation was clearly sinking in, their faces drawn with genuine worry and fear. We found everything, my father said, holding out a manila folder with trembling hands. All the paperwork from the sale. I took the folder without comment and began reviewing the documents carefully with Tyler. The situation was even worse than I had initially thought. Not only had they forged my signature on multiple documents, but they had also created a completely fraudulent bill of sale with an incorrect VIN number. This is a complete disaster, Tyler muttered under his breath. They created fake documents that don't even match the car's actual identification numbers. My mother began sobbing again, even louder this time. We don't know anything about cars or VIN numbers or legal documents. We just wanted to help Sophia with her mental health. Well, congratulations, I said with cold sarcasm. You've managed to commit multiple serious felonies, sell a car you didn't own, and potentially destroy your relationship with both your daughters, all to send Sophia on a luxury cruise she didn't earn and couldn't afford. What are you going to do? My father asked, his voice barely audible. I looked at Tyler, then back at my parents. We're going to call Mr. Richardson back, and you're going to tell him exactly what you did. After leaving my parents' house in a state of shock and betrayal, I drove straight to Tyler's apartment in my actual Mustang Boss 429, which had been safely stored in his climate-controlled garage exactly as we had planned. The familiar rumble of the authentic 429 engine provided little comfort as my mind raced with the implications of what had just been revealed. Tyler followed me in his sedan, since his Camaro was currently in New Hampshire with an innocent buyer who had no idea he had purchased stolen property. We agreed to meet immediately to discuss our next steps and figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. Sitting in Tyler's living room, surrounded by automotive magazines and model cars, the reality of what my parents had done began to sink in completely. They had not only betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible, but had also committed serious crimes that could result in significant prison time. And somewhere in the Mediterranean, my sister was living her best life on a luxury yacht, completely oblivious to the criminal chaos she had left in her wake. I still cannot believe they actually did this, I said for perhaps the 20th time, pacing frantically back and forth across Tyler's hardwood floors. Who sells someone else's car? What kind of people do that? Tyler sat calmly on his couch, his expression a mixture of anger and deep concern. People who feel entitled to whatever they want, he answered thoughtfully. Your parents clearly don't understand or respect basic boundaries. That's the understatement of the century, I said bitterly, collapsing beside him on the couch. The worst part is they genuinely don't seem to understand why what they did was wrong. They keep talking about family loyalty and helping Sophia as if that somehow justifies theft and fraud. What do you want to do about the buyer? Tyler asked practically. This Richardson guy is probably completely innocent in all of this. I nodded agreement. We need to call him back soon. I think we should be honest about what happened, but maybe frame it as a family misunderstanding rather than outright criminal fraud. At least until we figure out our next move. Just as we were discussing this delicate situation, my phone exploded with notifications. My parents had been calling and texting non-stop since we left their house, and the messages were becoming increasingly desperate. I ignored most of them, but one caught my attention immediately. A text from my mother saying, "Your Aunt Margaret thinks you're being completely selfish and ungrateful." Oh, perfect, I groaned, showing Tyler the message. They're already rallying the extended family against me. Sure enough, within the next hour, my phone rang with a call from my mother's older sister, Aunt Margaret. Isabella rose. She began without any preamble, using my first and middle names as she always did when preparing to lecture me. What is this I hear about you threatening to send your own parents to prison over a car, after everything they've done for you over the years? I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Aunt Margaret, with all due respect, you don't have the complete story. I know enough, she replied curtly. Your mother is absolutely distraught and beside herself. They were only trying to help your sister during a difficult time, and now you're talking about pressing criminal charges. What kind of daughter threatens her own parents like that? The kind whose parents stole property worth $35,000, I replied evenly, and not even my property, but my boyfriend's. They committed multiple felonies, Aunt Margaret. This isn't about being ungrateful. This is about serious criminal behavior. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she scoffed dismissively. Family helps family. Isabella rose. You've always been so independent and stubborn, so unwilling to compromise. Would it really have killed you to let your sister have this one little thing? The conversation continued in this frustrating vein for several more minutes, with my aunt firmly taking my parents' side and seemingly unable to grasp the severity of what they had actually done. By the time I hung up, I was absolutely fuming with anger and frustration. Family helps family, I mimicked bitterly to Tyler. Apparently that only applies when I'm the one expected to sacrifice something. Tyler squeezed my hand supportively. Not everyone will see it that way. Have you considered talking to your grandfather's brother, Uncle Roberto? You always said he was more reasonable than the rest of the family. Uncle Roberto had been very close to my grandfather Antonio and had always had a special soft spot for me and my automotive interests. When I called him and explained the entire situation, his reaction was completely different from Aunt Margaret's. They did what? He exclaimed in shock. Sold Tyler's car without permission. That's not just morally wrong, Isabella. That's serious criminal behavior. You have every right to be upset and angry. His immediate support and understanding meant more to me than I could possibly express. Everyone else in the family seems to think I should just forgive and forget because we're related. Being family doesn't give anyone the right to break the law, Uncle Roberto said firmly, or to completely trample over someone's boundaries and property rights. Your grandfather Antonio would be absolutely appalled by this behavior. After hanging up with Uncle Roberto, I felt marginally better about the situation, but the emotional exhaustion of the day was definitely catching up with me. Tyler suggested we order takeout food and try to relax for the evening, postponing any major decisions until the following day when we could think more clearly. As we sat eating Chinese food directly from the containers, Tyler looked at me thoughtfully. Can I ask you something personal? Of course, anything. If they had actually sold your real Mustang instead of my Camaro, what would you have done? I set down my fork, seriously considering the hypothetical question. Honestly, I probably would have pressed criminal charges immediately without any hesitation. That car is completely irreplaceable to me. It's my connection to my grandfather, the result of years of hard work and sacrifice. I don't think I could ever forgive them for that level of betrayal. And now it's complicated, I admitted. They still committed serious crimes, but against you, not directly against me. And while what they did was absolutely terrible and unforgivable, I'm not sure I want them to spend years in prison. They're still my parents, despite everything they've done. Tyler nodded slowly, understanding my conflicted feelings. I appreciate that, and for what it's worth, I don't particularly want your parents in prison either. But they absolutely need to make this situation right, and they need to understand that there are serious consequences for criminal behavior. We stayed up late into the night discussing our various options and trying to figure out the best path forward for everyone involved. Eventually, we decided to consult with a lawyer before making any final decisions about criminal charges or civil lawsuits. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned restlessly, my mind replaying the events of the day and wrestling with conflicting emotions about my family. On one hand, I was furious with my parents and wanted them to face appropriate consequences for their criminal actions. On the other hand, the thought of them actually in prison made me physically ill. Morning came too soon, and with it brought a new crisis that I hadn't anticipated. My parents showed up at my apartment building completely unannounced, looking haggard and desperate. They must have gotten my address from some old paperwork. Isabella, please, my mother begged when I reluctantly let them into my apartment. You have to help us. We can't sleep, we can't eat, we're absolutely terrified about what's going to happen. You should have thought about the potential consequences before selling a car that didn't belong to you, I said, completely unmoved by their obvious distress. We know we made a terrible mistake, my father said, his voice breaking with emotion. We'll do absolutely anything to make it right. Anything at all. Anything. I looked at their anxious, frightened faces, feeling a complex mixture of anger, pity, and complete emotional exhaustion. It's not that simple anymore. What you did wasn't just morally wrong, it was illegal. And it's not just up to me to decide what happens. The car you sold belonged to Tyler, not to me. We'll pay him back, my mother said quickly, desperately. Every single penny, plus interest. And where exactly will you get $35,000? I asked skeptically. You just told me money was tight because of the kitchen renovation. They exchanged a nervous glance. We'll figure something out, my father said with false confidence. Take out a second mortgage if we have to, or a home equity loan, whatever it takes to fix this mess. I sighed heavily, feeling the weight of the situation. Look, we're meeting with a lawyer friend this afternoon to discuss our legal options. Until then, I don't have anything else to say to either of you. Please, Isabella, my mother pleaded desperately. At least tell us you won't press criminal charges. We absolutely cannot go to prison. We're too old, we wouldn't survive it. That's not a promise I can make right now, I said firmly. You need to leave my apartment. I'll call you after we speak with the attorney. As I closed the door behind them, I leaned against it heavily, suddenly feeling exhausted despite the early hour. Whatever happened next in this situation, I knew with absolute certainty that my relationship with my parents would never, ever be the same again. At 2:30 p.m., Tyler and I sat in the sleek downtown Boston office of Carmen Rodriguez, a criminal defense attorney I had met during a corporate networking event 2 years earlier. We had kept in touch professionally, and when I called her that morning explaining our unusual situation, she immediately agreed to meet with us for a consultation. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Carmen said, reviewing the detailed notes she had taken during our explanation. Your parents sold Tyler's car without his permission, forged your signature on multiple documents, provided an incorrect VIN number to the buyer, and used the proceeds to fund your sister's luxury vacation. Is that an accurate summary? Yes, I confirmed grimly. That covers the basics. Carmen leaned back in her leather chair, her expression professionally grave. I won't sugarcoat this situation for you. What they did constitutes grand theft auto and wire fraud at a minimum. Each charge carries up to 20 years in prison under Massachusetts law. Given their age and lack of prior criminal history, they would probably receive more lenient sentences, but significant prison time is definitely on the table if charges are filed. Tyler and I exchanged concerned looks. Despite my anger and sense of betrayal, the thought of my parents actually in prison was difficult to contemplate. What are our realistic options here? I asked. You have several paths forward, Carmen explained professionally. 1. You could press full criminal charges and let the legal system handle everything. 2. You could pursue civil remedies. Sue them for the value of the car plus damages and legal fees. Or 3. You could attempt to resolve this privately, outside the legal system entirely. What would the third option involve exactly? Tyler asked with interest. Essentially, you would create a legally binding settlement agreement where your parents make complete financial restitution plus any other terms you deem appropriate. It wouldn't erase the criminal liability entirely, but without a formal complaint from the victims, it's highly unlikely the authorities would pursue prosecution. And what about the buyer? I asked, thinking about the innocent party in all this. Mr. Richardson is completely innocent in this situation. He paid good money for a car that was sold to him fraudulently. Carmen nodded agreement. That definitely complicates things. The cleanest solution would be to completely unwind the transaction, return his money in full, get the car back. But that means your parents would need to come up with $55,000 immediately. They mentioned taking out a home equity loan, I said thoughtfully. That could work, Carmen agreed. But you'd need to move very quickly. The longer this situation persists, the greater the chance of Mr. Richardson discovering the fraud independently and going to the authorities himself. After discussing more details about our various options and their potential consequences, Tyler and I left Carmen's office with a clear plan of action. We would attempt to resolve the situation privately and out of court, starting with contacting Mr. Richardson and being completely honest about what had happened. I think we should meet him in person, Tyler suggested as we walked to our cars. This isn't the kind of conversation you have over the phone. I agreed completely. We called Mr. Richardson to arrange a face-to-face meeting for the following day at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between Boston and his home in New Hampshire. Next, we turned our attention to tracking down my sister Sophia. She had been posting daily updates from her Mediterranean cruise, showing off her luxurious vacation while remaining completely oblivious to the criminal chaos she had left behind in Boston. After multiple attempts, I finally managed to reach her via the cruise ship's satellite phone system. "Isabella," she answered, with sounds of music and laughter clearly audible in the background. "Why are you calling me? Is something wrong back home?" "Yes, Sophia, something is very, very wrong," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady and controlled. "Mom and Dad sold a car to pay for your cruise. A car that didn't belong to them." There was a long pause. Then Sophia actually laughed. "Oh, is that all? I thought someone had died or something serious. Look, I know you're probably upset they sold your precious car, but you can always buy another one. It's not like you can't afford it with your fancy job." Her completely dismissive attitude made my blood boil with rage. "It wasn't my car they sold, Sophia. It was Tyler's car. What they did was illegal. They could go to prison for this." That finally got her attention and wiped the casual tone from her voice. "Prison? Don't be so dramatic and ridiculous. They were just trying to help me through a difficult time." "By committing fraud," I said firmly. "By stealing someone else's property. Those are serious crimes, Sophia, felonies with real consequences. So what exactly are you saying I should do?" Her voice had lost its carefree tone, replaced by growing concern and anxiety. "I'm saying you need to come home immediately. Your Mediterranean adventure is over, effective right now." "But the cruise doesn't end for another week," she protested. "We're supposed to visit 3 more ports." "Then get off at the next port and fly home," I said with absolute finality. "This is not optional, Sophia. You need to be part of fixing the mess you helped create." "I didn't create any mess," she said defensively. "I didn't ask them to sell anybody's car." "Didn't you?" I challenged her directly. "Because Mom told me you were talking about how desperately you needed this cruise, how depressed you were about missing it, how unfair life was." There was a telling silence on the other end of the line. "That's what I thought," I said with satisfaction. "Get home, Sophia. I'll text you all the details of what's happening, and you better be prepared to contribute financially to whatever repayment plan we work out." The next day, Tyler and I met with David Richardson, a middle-aged classic car enthusiast who had innocently purchased Tyler's stolen Camaro. He was understandably upset and angry when we carefully explained the true situation to him. "So let me get this absolutely straight," he said, his face reddening with anger. "I bought a stolen car with completely forged documents." "Technically, yes," I admitted reluctantly, though my parents would probably argue they thought they had permission to sell it. "That's not how legal permission works, Mr. Richardson said angrily, and rightfully so. "I spent $55,000 on that car. I've already registered it in my name, added it to my insurance policy, shown it to friends. This is a complete nightmare." "We understand completely," Tyler said calmly and diplomatically, "and we want to make this situation right for everyone involved. We're prepared to offer you a full refund of the $55,000 plus an additional $10,000 for the inconvenience and any expenses you've incurred." Mr. Richardson seemed somewhat mollified by this generous offer. "And what about the car itself?" "We would need it returned, obviously," I explained. "It legally belongs to Tyler." After some additional negotiation and discussion, Mr. Richardson agreed to our terms with the reasonable condition that the money be wired to his bank account before he would release the car. Now we just needed my parents to somehow come up with $65,000. When we presented this solution to my parents, they were simultaneously relieved and horrified by the financial implications. $65,000? My mother repeated, looking like she might faint. "Where are we possibly supposed to get that kind of money?" "You mentioned a home equity loan," I reminded them coldly. "Or you could liquidate some of your retirement investments. This is not my problem to solve, Mom. You created this situation entirely." "But we don't have that much equity in the house," my father protested weakly. "The real estate market has been down, and with all the money we've spent on renovations." "Then I suggest you start looking at other creative options," Tyler said firmly. "Because right now, This settlement is the only thing standing between you and serious criminal charges. We could maybe come up with $50,000, my father offered after a hushed, desperate conversation with my mother, but definitely not $65,000. Tyler shook his head decisively. Not acceptable. The full amount needs to be repaid, plus reasonable compensation for my time, stress, and inconvenience. If you can't come up with it yourselves, perhaps Sophia should contribute since she directly benefited from the theft. Sophia? My mother looked genuinely shocked at the suggestion, but she's just starting her career. She barely makes enough to cover her basic living expenses. Then she shouldn't be taking expensive Mediterranean cruises, should she? I pointed out logically, actions have consequences, Mom, for everyone involved, not just for me. It took 2 more days of tense negotiations and family drama, but eventually a comprehensive plan was hammered out. My parents would take out a home equity loan for $45,000. Sophia, who had reluctantly returned from her cruise 3 days early, would contribute $15,000 from her savings account, which I strongly suspected had been largely funded by my parents over the years anyway. And they would sell my mother's expensive jewelry collection to cover the remaining $5,000. Tyler insisted on one additional non-negotiable condition: a formal, written apology acknowledging exactly what they had done and promising never to touch or make decisions about our property again. This document would be signed and notarized, providing additional legal protection should anything similar ever happen in the future. My parents initially balked at this final requirement. A verbal apology is one thing, my mother said stiffly, but a notarized legal document seems unnecessarily extreme and humiliating. Not as extreme as a 20-year prison sentence, Tyler countered firmly. This is completely non-negotiable. Take it or leave it. With absolutely no other viable options remaining, they eventually agreed to all our terms and conditions. Carmen drew up all the necessary legal paperwork, including a comprehensive settlement agreement that specified the financial restitution and established a strict timeline for payment. The most emotionally difficult part of this entire process was the family meeting we held in my apartment. Sophia, now forced to face the real-world consequences of her manipulative actions, alternated between defensive anger and tearful self-pity. "Why am I being punished financially?" she demanded. "I didn't actually sell the car myself." "No," I replied coldly. "You just emotionally manipulated Mom and Dad into funding a luxury vacation you couldn't afford and didn't deserve. You're 24 years old, Sophia. A grown adult. It's past time you started acting like one and taking responsibility for your choices." "That's not fair," she exclaimed. "You've always been jealous of me because Mom and Dad love me more than they love you." The room fell into stunned silence at her brutal, honest outburst. Even our parents looked shocked by her words. "Is that really what you think?" I asked quietly, more hurt than angry. "That they love you more than me?" "Well," she said, her voice smaller now but still defiant, "they've always given me more things, protected me more, made things easier for me. That's what love looks like, isn't it?" "And look how that's turned out," I said, not unkindly but truthfully. "You're 24 and you can't financially support yourself. You manipulate them into bailing you out every time life gets challenging. That's not love, Sophia. That's enabling, and it's been harmful to both of us." My mother started to protest, but my father placed a restraining hand on her arm, stopping her from speaking. For perhaps the first time in years, he seemed to be truly listening and thinking. "Vanessa is right," he said slowly and thoughtfully. "We haven't done you any real favors, Sophia. We thought we were protecting you and showing our love, but we've just prevented you from learning how to stand on your own 2 feet." This unexpected support from my father completely changed the tenor of our conversation. Over the next several hours, we had the most honest, painful, and necessary discussion our family had ever experienced. There were plenty of tears, angry recriminations, and painful admissions of truth. But by the end of that long evening, something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. It was as if a long festering wound had finally been opened and drained, allowing the possibility of genuine healing to begin. The following week was a whirlwind of activity and stress. My parents secured their home equity loan through their bank. Sophia reluctantly but responsibly transferred her contribution from her savings account. My mother sold several pieces of expensive jewelry through a consignment shop, including her diamond anniversary ring. And Tyler and I coordinated with Mr. Richardson to complete the car exchange and financial transaction. The day my parents met with Tyler to formally apologize was tense but absolutely necessary for moving forward. My mother, who had always been proud and stubborn, struggled visibly to find the right words. "We are truly, deeply sorry, Tyler," my father finally said when it became clear Mom couldn't get the words out. "What we did was wrong, illegal, and completely disrespectful. We betrayed your trust and Isabella's trust. We have absolutely no excuse for our behavior." Tyler accepted their apology with grace and dignity, though I knew it would take considerable time for him to fully forgive them. The notarized legal document was signed with all parties present. The money was successfully transferred to Mr. Richardson's account, and Tyler's Camaro was returned to him, thankfully completely undamaged. As we drove away from the lawyer's office that final day, Tyler's restored Camaro following safely behind us, I felt an enormous weight lifting from my shoulders. The immediate situation was far from perfectly resolved, and the emotional fallout would undoubtedly continue for months or even years. But the crisis had been successfully averted through hard work and compromise. "Thank you," I said to Tyler, reaching across the center console to take his hand, "for being so understanding and supportive throughout this entire nightmare." He squeezed my hand warmly. "That's what real partners do. We face challenges together, no matter how difficult or complicated they become." Looking in my rearview mirror at Tyler's familiar red Camaro, now safely back in his possession, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps some genuine good could eventually come from this painful family experience. 1 month after the car crisis had been resolved, I found myself sitting once again at my parents' dining room table for our first family dinner since the incident. The atmosphere was markedly different from our gatherings before everything had happened, a careful mixture of cautious optimism and lingering tension that reflected our new reality as a family. My father placed a platter of grilled salmon on the table, his hands showing fresh calluses from the weekend landscaping job he had taken to help repay the home equity loan more quickly. My mother followed with a bowl of fresh salad, her once manicured nails now plain and neatly trimmed. Her expensive diamond rings were noticeably absent, sold to help make restitution to Tyler. Sophia texted that she's running about 15 minutes late, Mom said, checking her phone. Something about delayed public transportation from downtown. My sister had started a new job 3 weeks earlier, an entry-level position at a digital marketing agency that paid less than her previous job but offered much better opportunities for career advancement. To her credit, she hadn't complained once about the early mornings, demanding workload, or significant pay cut. Tyler sat beside me, having been specifically invited by my parents as a gesture of reconciliation and respect. He had been hesitant to accept the invitation, but I had encouraged him to come. "They need to see us as a united team," I had explained to him. "They need to understand that hurting you means hurting me too." Conversation during the early part of dinner was initially somewhat stilted and awkward, focusing on safe, neutral topics like the unseasonably warm weather and local neighborhood news. But gradually, as we all began to relax slightly, more meaningful and personal exchanges started to emerge naturally. "I spoke with Uncle Roberto yesterday," my father mentioned casually as he served himself a second helping of salmon. "He's finally thinking seriously about selling his old Mustang convertible. Says he's getting too old to properly maintain a classic car." "That's really a shame," I replied genuinely. "That car has been in our family for decades." My father nodded thoughtfully, then cleared his throat somewhat nervously. "I was actually thinking maybe I could buy it from him and restore it properly. I know it's not a Boss 429 like yours, but I thought maybe, if you were interested and willing, we could work on it together as a project." His eyes met mine briefly before darting away, uncharacteristically shy and vulnerable. "I know I never showed much interest in your automotive passion before, but I'd really like to learn if you're willing to teach me. I want to understand what matters to you." The offer touched me more deeply than I had expected. It wasn't really about the car at all, It was my father making a genuine effort to connect with me on my terms, to understand and appreciate something that had always been important to me. I would really like that, Dad, I said sincerely. I think that sounds like a wonderful project for us. My mother watched this exchange with a small, hopeful smile. Over the past month, she had been making her own consistent efforts to change her behavior patterns. The weekly family therapy sessions we had all been attending had helped her recognize and acknowledge her lifelong pattern of boundary violations and obvious favoritism between her daughters. I made something special for you, Tyler, she said, rising from the table and retrieving a gift bag from the sideboard. Just a small token of our appreciation and respect. Tyler accepted the bag with polite curiosity, pulling out a professionally framed document. It was the title to his Camaro, along with a handwritten letter promising never to interfere with his property or mine ever again. I had it professionally framed, Mom explained, her voice slightly emotional. As much as a reminder to myself as a gift to you. I'm still learning that boundaries really matter, and I need constant reminders. Thank you, Catherine, Tyler said warmly, using my mother's first name as she had recently invited him to do. I genuinely appreciate this gesture. The front door opened and Sophia hurried in, slightly out of breath from rushing. Sorry I'm so late, everyone. The client meeting ran much longer than expected, and then the subway was completely delayed. She hung up her coat and joined us at the table, looking noticeably more mature somehow in her professional business attire. Her previously expensive highlighted hair was now its natural brown color, and she was wearing minimal makeup. The most striking change in Sophia, however, was in her overall demeanor and attitude. Gone was the entitled, self-centered behavior that had characterized most of her interactions before the car incident. In its place was a newfound awareness of other people and her impact on them. How was your day, Isabella? She asked genuinely after greeting everyone warmly. Before the car crisis, she had rarely shown any real interest in my life or career. Good, thanks, I replied, still somewhat surprised by her attention. Busy with the new promotion responsibilities. The international accounts are demanding, but everything is coming together well. That's the promotion you got from the London trip, right? She asked, demonstrating that she had actually been listening to our previous conversations. Vice President of International Development. I nodded, impressed that she had remembered such specific details. Still getting used to the new title and responsibilities. That's really impressive, Isabella, she said with genuine admiration. And for once, there was absolutely no undercurrent of competition, resentment, or jealousy in her voice, just authentic pride in my accomplishments. As dinner progressed naturally, I found myself observing my family members with completely new eyes. The changes were subtle but incredibly significant to me. My father asking permission before adding more food to my mother's plate. My mother catching herself before speaking for Sophia or making assumptions about what she wanted. Sophia offering to help clear dishes and clean up without being asked or reminded. These were small things, perhaps inconsequential to an outside observer. But to me, they represented a fundamental shift in our family dynamics and communication patterns. The painful experience we had all endured together had forced us to confront long-established behaviors that had been damaging our relationships for years. After dessert, as Tyler and I prepared to leave for the evening, my mother gently pulled me aside in the hallway for a private conversation. I know I've said this before, she began, her voice low and serious, but I am truly, deeply sorry, Isabella. Not just for the car incident, but for all the times over the years I dismissed your feelings, your passions, your clearly stated boundaries. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I always thought I was being a good mother by treating you and Sophia differently, by pushing you to be strong and independent while protecting her from challenges. I can see now how incredibly unfair that was to both of you, in different ways. I studied her face carefully, noting the genuine remorse and self-reflection in her eyes. Thank you for saying that, Mom. It really does mean a lot to me to hear you acknowledge it. Do you think, she asked hesitantly, that you'll ever be able to fully forgive us for what we did? I considered her question thoughtfully and honestly. I think forgiveness is an ongoing process, not a single moment or decision. I'm actively working on it every day, and seeing all of you make these real, consistent changes definitely helps me move forward." She nodded, accepting my incomplete but completely honest answer with grace. As Tyler and I drove home in my beloved Mustang, the familiar rumble of the 429 engine was deeply comforting. The car had taken on additional layers of meaning for me now. It was still my precious connection to my grandfather Antonio, still the symbol of my hard work and persistence and independence. But it had also become an unexpected catalyst for necessary change in my family, a painful but ultimately healing confrontation with long-buried issues and dysfunctional patterns. "Penny for your thoughts," Tyler said, noticing my contemplative mood as we drove through the quiet Boston streets. "I was just thinking about how sometimes the things we value most can become unexpected tests of character," I replied thoughtfully. This whole situation with my car revealed truths about my family that were incredibly hard to face, but probably needed to be faced eventually. "Do you regret anything about the way we handled it?" he asked. I shook my head definitively. Not at all. It would have been much easier to just let them off the hook completely, to avoid all the conflict and drama. But that would have just reinforced the same unhealthy patterns that had been hurting our family for years. They needed to experience real consequences, and I needed to stand firm with my boundaries. "I think you found exactly the right balance," Tyler said supportively, "holding them accountable without cutting them off completely from your life. That takes real strength and wisdom." "And incredible support," I added, squeezing his hand across the center console. "I absolutely could not have done any of this without you." The next morning, I took the Mustang for a long, meditative drive along the scenic Massachusetts coastline, something I had done countless times before for relaxation and reflection. But today felt fundamentally different somehow. As the ocean breeze rushed through my hair and the morning sun glinted brilliantly off the car's polished grabber blue hood, I felt a profound sense of peace and resolution that I hadn't experienced in years. The car was still just a car, an object made of metal and rubber and glass. But what it represented in my life had evolved and deepened. Now it symbolized not just my connection to the past and my grandfather's memory, but also my commitment to my own self-worth and dignity. My refusal to be diminished, disregarded, or taken advantage of, even by those who claimed to love me most. Perhaps the most valuable lesson from this entire painful ordeal was learning that standing up for yourself doesn't mean abandoning or rejecting the people you love. It means loving them enough to establish and maintain healthy boundaries that allow for mutual respect, growth, and genuine relationship. It means finding the inner strength to say this behavior is not acceptable while still leaving room for redemption and reconciliation. As I pulled back into my apartment complex, I thought about the long journey our family had embarked upon together. The ongoing therapy sessions, the difficult but necessary conversations, the small daily choices each of us was making to do better and be better. None of it was easy or comfortable, but all of it was absolutely necessary for our growth as individuals and as a family. The road ahead would definitely not be perfectly smooth. Old habits and patterns die hard, and there would inevitably be setbacks, disagreements, and moments of regression. But for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely hopeful about my family's future. I was confident that we were all moving in the right direction, and that was truly priceless, more valuable than any car or material possession could ever be. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who completely crossed your boundaries and violated your trust? How did you balance holding them accountable while still maintaining the relationship? Share your own experiences and thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if this story resonated with you in any way. Remember, setting firm boundaries isn't selfish, it's absolutely necessary for healthy, respectful relationships. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I truly hope it helps you navigate your own complex family dynamics with courage, wisdom, and compassion.